Hey, y'all. So let's talk about the prophetic. So we've noticed some issues within the prophetic community. You have people saying God said when God didn't say. You have people saying this is the will of God when it isn't the will of God. You have people not knowing whether they're hearing themselves or they're just echoing the propaganda that they're used to listening to, or if it actually is God speaking in an unusual way. You have a lot of confusion in what should be or who presents themselves as mature prophetic leaders, right? So, what's going on? How does this happen? To address that, you have to look at the heart of the prophetic. What is the prophetic? Well, the prophetic is the essence of the prophet, but the prophetic isn't limited to only prophets. See, the function of the prophet isn't to prophesy or to foretell events. That's something that happens, but that's not really the function. The function of a prophet is to speak into something broken, the blueprint that it was created using. It's to look into what should be when you're dealing with people, places, and things, to reveal the actual identity behind a thing, the actual divine intent behind something's creation. The function of the prophetic is alignment. Remember that. So you know a real prophet by a false prophet by their ability to stir. Remember, the word prophet in the Hebrew is nabi. Nabi means to bubble up or to stir. And this is a key characteristic. So it's not just about you getting whacked in the spirit, shaking and jerking around. That's not what it's about. Nabi has to do with the ability to stir, meaning that when you are encountering someone, that which they should be, that which they're called to be, begins to wake up on the inside of them. And that causes a conflict because oftentimes you're dealing with sleeping giants. They have a world built on top of them that they're sleeping under. And should they begin to wake up, that world comes crashing down. So understand that the real prophetic is very dangerous. It's chaotic, it's busy, it's messy, but it's a necessary work. Understand that chaos isn't always a bad thing. Dysfunction oftentimes is very stable. There are systems built around dysfunction, and when the prophetic is in operation, it comes against that system and destroys it. It messes it up. It causes disorder where there was an order, but that was the wrong order. So that's really the essence of a prophet. The essence of the prophetic still remains as expressing the intent and the heart or the mind of God to a person, place, or a thing, expressing God's perspective, God's action, God's heart, God's mind in a situation that's lacking that clarity. So if you're doing personal prophecy, you're reminding people of who they were created as in eternity, what they were put on earth to do. You're helping take them out of the misalignment that they might find themselves in, and you're bringing them into where their destiny lies. It's an agent of alignment. If you're dealing with a place, you're looking at a place and you're saying, no, this city has some destiny on it. This region is marked by God. This is what's supposed to be here. And you begin to speak into what's there. And this goes with many other things as well, but that's the heart behind the prophetic. What you have instead, and I'll get to why this is happening, what you have instead is people claiming to be prophetic, and all they are is a Christian with a perspective, a Christian with an opinion, and they've learned how to they've learned how to orate. They're very good at lyricism. They're very good at poetry. They're good at getting that message across, but they're really just sharing their opinion, their best guess, their theology, their philosophy, and they're covering it with a divine archetype to make it look like prophecy. And that's what y'all fall for the most. So this is what happens This is what happened to America. You have people, right? And we're going to talk about this in a few fronts, but I can't find something better at the moment than what's currently happening, where you have otherwise prophetic people who are accurate in every other account or on point in every other account give themselves over to politics. And I'm not saying that spiritual people don't have a role in politics or that prophecy doesn't belong in politics. Not saying that at all. I believe it does. And I believe the main issue with our politics is that we don't prophesy enough. Where these people who were authentically prophetic, or who are authentically prophetic, authentically called, were so given over to their political perspective, their ideals, their philosophies, their stances, their gripes, their icks, that they're now telling the world that God now supports rape, murder, molestation, that God supports racism, that God is a white supremacist, that blatant evil, that genocide is a move of God. And they've gotten very good, because they're also theologians, at covering up their stance, which is just their stance, with scripture and making it sound like it's God. And for far too long, because we like these people and we've benefited from these people and they're good in all these other arenas, that we let that stuff go unchecked. And I'll tell you, for me, I gave up having a political party almost a decade ago. It's been years. I gave that up a while ago because I realized, as a black male American citizen, that neither party alone, if we're talking parties, had my best interest at heart. So I haven't been a part of a faction in a very long time, which gives me the freedom to look at and criticize and benefit from whatever's happening, should something be happening. So because I don't have a side to defend, whatever's actually happening is what I tend to report on. It's what I end up talking about. And I say that spiritual people do have a place to play in politics. There's no reason that we should have suffered the embarrassment that was 2020's election, which made all of us prophetic people look bad, where all those people got on TV and said Trump was going to win this election. They said Trump was going to serve 2 consecutive terms, and then Pence was going to serve 2 terms. I remember one lady, she said, "Oh no, Biden's not going to win." She said that the Lord Jesus Christ himself stood in her kitchen and would meet in her dining room every day and sit with her, and he told her that Biden wasn't going to win. And the only cabinets that he was going to have were the cabinets in his kitchen. You realize how dangerous that is when y'all let that stuff fly just because they mirror your political stance. Have your politics, have them, but separate that stuff when you start mixing in authentic prophetic and mysticism with it, because then that affects the rest of the community. Now we all just look like whack jobs. And it's all because you have an opinion you won't let go of. You have a stance, you have an affiliation, you have a faction you won't die to, which is an altar erected in your soul that's actually guiding what you're willing to share from God when it does come from the Spirit. I remember back in 2021, right after Biden took office, so many people who had nothing negative to say about Trump all of a sudden had all of these doom and judgment prophecies about Biden. I'm like, hold up, you mean to tell me that the whole time that we had a supervillain in office, God didn't have any messages about him needing to repent, he needs to do right, obey the word of the Lord? Y'all didn't have any of those things for him, and that's why he ended up losing the last time. Because I do believe that Trump, as much as I don't personally like him, he had a role to play that he didn't get to play. So now he's playing a different role. And this role isn't even because God rehired him. This is because the people wanted him back. Or let's just say enough people wanted him back. Being careful with my words. The right people wanted him back. So this was very much, this election was more of a give us Barabbas than it was God putting things back in orders. No, 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 no. You're about to see some horrible things happen. And the question people are going to ask is, where were the prophets when we needed them? Where was the word of God that was supposed to warn us? Why didn't anyone warn us about this? And that's already happening. Now, I'll tell you what happened. The people who weren't your favorites were on point. The unpopular prophetic voices, because you forgot that the prophetic isn't about who's popular. It's about who surrendered themselves to being a voice for God's voice. Who's willing to share God's mind instead of their mind? Who's willing to share God's heart instead of their heart? And should they share their mind or their heart, they know how to do that as an individual and not try to cover it in prophecy, not try to cover it in spiritual lingo. Let your opinions be your opinions, but when it's time to prophesy, let that be God. So this is a virus that's been plaguing the prophetic community for years. This goes before we even had an idea of a Donald Trump, before Kim Clement came and started the cult that we now have to deal with. We've been dealing with this, where you have a stance, whether it's political or social or whatever it is. And instead of just being honest about you having an opinion, you have to throw some ethos on it. You have to throw God on it to give it a little bit more credibility. And it's also a way to go unchecked, because if they challenge the word that you gave, the idea behind it is that they're challenging God, but they're not discerning. This is why they'll teach people to prophesy, but they won't, and they'll teach people to receive prophecy, but they won't teach them to discern spirits. Because if you start to discern spirits, you'll recognize when you're being played by a prophet who's not prophesying right now. A prophet who has an agenda behind his message. So right now we have a lot of people who now want to pray, who now want to hold the prophetic community accountable, but it's far too late for that. If you were going to hold the prophetic community accountable, you should have started doing that in 2015. You should have started doing that when people started dressing up. You know, they had prophets wrapped in American flags preaching the gospel. I remember I went to one meeting and the guy said he was so stuck in Christian nationalism. Trump losing that election broke him. He was so stuck in Christian nationalism, which isn't kingdom at all, that he said that if you want to see demons manifest, let's just, you need to say the Pledge of Allegiance or play the national anthem. Now, what he's saying is he personally doesn't like that people don't like the American national anthem, or that they don't like the Pledge of Allegiance. His presentation of that is now it's a spiritual issue. Now it's demons manifesting, instead of people just being upset at blatant racism and a system that continues to oppress people. Yeah. Now, I'm avoiding saying names because y'all accuse me of attacking people. I'll attack their ideologies. If I want to make an exposed video, I will. But it's not really how I do things. I don't plan these videos myself. I get commissioned to do this stuff. So when it comes to cleansing the prophetic community, what needs to happen? One, you need to realize that the job of a prophet is not to hear God for you. It's actually no one's job to hear God for you. In fact, the way that you know whether or not a prophetic word is accurate or not is because you're supposed to talk to God on your own and verify it. Hey, did you say all of this? But no, prophets and even fake prophets have understood the business enough to know that if they put you on the spot, you'll do whatever they want you to do. Now you've lost $1,000 and that blessing ain't on the way just because the prophet knew your bank. He knew the last four digits of your credit card that you used when you filled out the you filled out the Eventbrite form in order to go to the event, and they got your name and your address, so they up there giving you a fake word of knowledge. Y'all didn't know that's how some of them do that. Watch those free registrations. That's how they do that stuff. Not all of them. There are people who authentically do function in word of knowledge, but that's how y'all be getting played. Also, is they just read the registration and pick somebody and hope y'all are there. And they know what credit card number and they know the address. Uh so how do you start to fix this problem? Again, recognize that no one is supposed to be in the middle of you hearing from God. Everyone can hear from God directly. So what does that come down to? It's, well, if you're the prophetic leader, understand that your role as a prophet isn't to prophesy, as in, it's not just to be talking to talk, it's not just to be trying to do words of knowledge and words of wisdom to wow the crowd. That's not your job. Your job as a prophetic leader is to bring alignment. If that manifests in the form of a prophetic word, then it does. But the end result should be alignment, not empty pockets, or not just more venues to speak at. Now you're a part of the network. Now you got some places to travel. I'm itinerant now. That's not the heart of it. When you're prophesying and you call yourself a prophetic leader, when you call yourself prophesying and sharing the heart and mind of God, what comes out of your mouth needs to be the heart and mind of God. And if you don't know, you don't share it. If you, as the prophetic leader, are uncertain whether or not you're hearing God, you're not hearing God, go sit down. We don't need you that bad. What we need from you is the part of you that's connected to God, not the portion of you that you're using to push yourself when you don't have that connection. We don't need that. The world doesn't need that part. The world needs the part of you that God has anointed and appointed, not this Jezebel that's trying to prophesy but doesn't have the intimacy necessary for it to work. So what happens? You begin to rely on the cliche phrases that we've all heard growing up. Woman of God, God wanted me to tell you that your time is here. This is your day, that he has heard your cries. He has heard what you've been praying about in the midnight hour. And the thing that you've been praying about, he's going to give it to you now and hope they fall. Lord, see, this is a time I see a transition. God is taking you from one place and he's moving you into another. You're in a great season of transition. We've heard that already, right? See, and people like to cover that up and say, oh, it's just edifying. No, that's lying. I can edify you without lying to you. Hey, I like you, and I believe that God has a purpose for you. If God don't tell me what it is, that's all I need to say. And that's not even a prophetic word. That's just edification. It's just the building up of another. Hey, you're doing really good at that. It's an affirmation, right? Affirming each other. You can do that without trying to make it, this is what God sees about you. No, this is what I see in you. I love this about you. You're doing a good job at this. I respect this about you. I love when you're in your element. There's ways to be encouraging without lying to people. But what happens is we've grown accustomed to these cliche words. When to say what, when to lay hands, oh, I finally got them emotional. They rocking already. Let me push them over. The theatrics. You know how to get it to appear a certain way. And honestly, that creates casualties. That's why people are losing their lives behind that stuff. People are losing their livelihoods behind that stuff. People are going into desolation because the prophets couldn't stay focused. So, how do you, as a prophetic leader, begin to cleanse your eyes? Because you should know when evil is moving around you. Blindness isn't a sign that God just don't want you to know. It's more of a sign that you don't care. So, how do you begin to purify your eyes to gain some clarity? You need to get comfortable with sitting and listening, sitting and allowing God to do deliverance on you in private. When I was starting out, I would sit in my prayer closet for hours every day and allow God to work on me so that I knew that when God had me say something, I knew who it was coming from, I knew who it belonged to. Time out for this. I don't know who this is for type of prophecy. I'm not going to pick on y'all too much because, even Samuel, who they regard as one of the best prophets, he did that. He walked in the Jesse house and anointed everybody. He tried to. If the oil wasn't smart, he would have anointed the first brother. Uh, but, I sit until I know, and I don't share what I don't because I don't have a point to prove. But you need to be comfortable sitting and listening and receiving your message. You need to, okay, Father, reveal your mind to me that I might know your thoughts. And then you sit and you receive those thoughts. God, I need you to reveal your heart to me on this topic. And you wait until they reveal their heart to you on that topic. Y'all use the Bible as a crutch. You'll go look for a verse as close as you can get to what's happening around you, and that's not the same as hearing God for yourself. Not saying that you can't learn things from the Bible, but the Bible ain't got nothing to do with prophecy. It doesn't. The Bible has some prophecies in it, but it even gives you the codes for the prophetic within the Bible, which isn't itself. The flow for the prophetic is intimacy. You actually have to know the God that you're planning on being a messenger for. That's the code of the prophetic. It doesn't move any further than intimacy. So when you have this many distracted prophets, this many off prophets, this many weird prophets, this many sold out prophets, remember, real prophets gave themselves over to Jezebel. So I'm not even calling some of y'all false prophets. Y'all are distracted prophets. Y'all are idolatrous prophets. In the same way they gave themselves over to Jezebel, y'all done gave yourself over to Trump. And the nation is suffering because of it. Now, if you had prophets who had their boldness, who had their integrity, we'd be in a different state. You have, if you're going to be a prophetic voice, you have to allow the God that you're being a prophetic voice to actually speak through you. It's not about getting a few things right so that you can share your opinion and people just feed on it. That's witchcraft. And I'm not even necessarily calling y'all witches. I'm addressing the practice that y'all are in of sharing your opinion and doing crowd control and covering it up as if it's a word from God. That's witchcraft. Y'all are doing that just to maintain control of the masses because you notice the masses are slipping from your control. So you're relying on the ethos that your religion was built on to keep people trapped. Cleansing prophetic streams. I would sit and listen to God until I heard God. What do we have today? Prophets going around saying, "Oh, God don't speak to me directly. I just watch movies and maybe I might maybe I might have an aha moment, or I just open the Bible and whatever it land on is what God wanted me to have for today." Or you have people saying, "Oh, I just see numbers all throughout the day." Y'all need to grow up. That's not God choosing to speak to you a certain way. That's you choosing to listen a certain way. That's the only way you're willing to receive a message from God. That's not something to be proud of, that you can't hear God clearly and you're a leader. Everyone can hear the audible voice of God. So I'll tell you this, if your leader finds it odd to hear the voice of God, that's a red flag. That means that if they're doing their best, they're giving you their best and they're not giving you what God has given them because they can't hear. They don't know what it is. How do you gain clarity? You need to be comfortable sitting and listening. If you're going to put your whole identity in the prophetic, hearing God needs to be your number one priority. And this is the other thing. Please stop prophesying after things have already happened. Pet peeve of mine, right? I remember back when Russia first invaded Ukraine. Russia has been telling us that they were getting ready to invade Ukraine since 2018. That's as early as I remember. And then the week leading up to when they finally did it, Russia said, hey, we're going to be there this weekend. I'm seeing prophetic leaders, quote unquote, prophetic leaders and prophets talking about God has shown me that Russia is about to invade Ukraine. I'm like, hey, buddy, that's already on the news. We know. It's a little late for that. I see war and rumors of war. I'm just like, yeah, we saw the news too. You're not special, okay? It's a little late for that. After COVID has come, now you want to tell people, yeah, God showed me a while ago that we were going to have a pandemic that was going to sweep over. Hey, join the club. God told me in 2018. I warned people for 2 years. No one listened because I wasn't popular yet. They're like, oh yeah, God told me, I don't know, now all of a sudden everybody, all the prophets that were alive at the time, yeah, God told me that something was going to happen at the Twin Towers. I was working in the building when it happened. And God had me go outside and warn people for 3 weeks straight, just standing out on the streets. Don't go in the Twin Towers. Y'all some liars. Y'all are some liars. It's okay. If you didn't hear it, just be honest that you didn't hear it. And then that's an angle for repentance. Okay, God, I feel like I should have known that that was going to happen. What am I distracted by? That's how you should come back into alignment as a prophetic leader. What was I distracted by where I didn't see this coming? What was I distracted by that had me supporting this? What was I distracted by where I didn't pick up on something this obvious? You told them, but you didn't tell me, or I didn't hear you. What had my attention so full that I couldn't hear you speak? Because the responsibility still falls on you as a prophetic leader. Why aren't you hearing God clearly? And that's your responsibility to fix. What are you distracted by? What are you trying to prove? What are you trying to maintain? What are you afraid of? Those are some questions to bring before God in conversation. Hey, what is in the way of me seeing more? There's other people who are able to see years in advance so that they can know what to do. I'm tired of playing catch up behind these atrocities. Things go wrong and we're reactionary instead of being before it. Help me get my mind right. Help me fix my focus so that I can actually be of benefit when things happen. For example, right? I knew we were going into a famine. I've been trying to, I started a charity to start planting trees so that I can start, providing food for people that didn't have it. That was my solution I had years in advance that I've been working on because I saw where we were going to. There's other things that I know are coming up. I actually have been posting updates. In fact, if you go to Patreon, I have a post on there called Things to Come. There's some things still coming up. For example, major power outages are still coming to the US. We're going to be without power, and I see it happening in different regions, but large regions at a time being without internet, without electricity, water being shut off. These are some things that I and my team have been working on, my community have been working on for a few years now to be able to provide a solution when that day comes. Or if it can be averted, avert it, right? We've been prophesying about planes falling out of the sky for a few years now. In fact, one of the ways that I used to prophesy when I was in high school is that I used to draw murals and artwork. And I actually still have a painting, well, not a painting, it wasn't a painting, a drawing that I sketched about plane crashes and train derailments. You know, these are things that you have in advance to warn people if possible, to avert if possible. It does the world no good if these atrocities happen and now you want to hear God for a solution. The solution was the solutions were given 2-3 years ago. So as a prophetic leader, you have to make up your mind to not be playing catch up. You have to decide that you want to hear God on a solution before the problem shows up so that you can be there. That's what will give glory to the kingdom. That's how you glorify God. It's saying, hey, God showed me this was a problem. So we already have the solution ready right now. Hey, all of y'all are panicking. God told us this was happening. Show up to XYZ location. This is where you can get your resources from. We've been working on this for a few years. This is how you begin to prepare. This is what the prophetic looks like in regards to the news. It can't be reactionary. You have to grow up past that stuff. But again, it comes down to intimacy. You have prophets who are more interested in prophesying and wowing a crowd than they are. It reminds me of one of the areas in the Bible that people they never teach on. Elijah was so attuned with God and had such good sensory skills in the spirit that he could hear conversations happening in other nations. So he knew what political leaders were up to and was able to act accordingly so that when they would send armies through his territory, he was there waiting on them because he heard their generals give the order. He heard their leaders giving the orders. That's the type of prophetic timing that is necessary in the world. Your job as a prophetic leader isn't just to, pray after things go wrong. You're supposed to know beforehand and should have sat and listened long enough to find the solution. Warning beforehand. There's different parts. Sometimes people don't get the whole thing, but you shouldn't be shocked and you shouldn't be finding out when the rest of the world finds out. No. We're talking about authentic prophetic culture. We need to be ahead of the ball. You need to be ahead of it. Before the events is when you should be having these conversations with God, not after. And to that same regard, you need to start holding prophetic leaders accountable for that stuff. Something happens and it's just viral news at this point, and now they have a prophetic word. Hey, guess what? We don't want to hear this. You should have said this a while ago. Why didn't God tell you this before? Why didn't you hear God on it before it happened? Start holding leaders accountable for that. Stop accepting them just because you respect them. Just because you've benefited from their ministry, you let them get away with lame stuff like that. Because if we don't come out of this, it's going to be more and more atrocities. People wonder, it's like, man, where were the sons in 1933? What were the spiritual community doing? They was doing what y'all doing. They were distracted too. Y'all have to stop being distracted. Again, go before God. Hey, what is catching my attention? What red herring am I following to where I always miss out on these major events? Because one of the ways that leaders cover it up is that they say, oh, don't be swayed. This is somebody that can't see and they just don't want to have accountability. They're like, oh, don't be swayed by what's going on in the news. God's not talking about any of that. God's ways are not our ways. What they're saying is, I'm just as shocked as you, but I don't want to appear reactionary. So I'm going to pretend that God doesn't care. All that does is raise up a culture of sociopaths, of narcissists. Narcissism in the prophetic community. What does that mean? That means I'm only concerned with my community and the people that benefit me, and I don't care about what's going on in the world out there. You realize the main function of prophecy is for somebody else, or something else is not for you? Right. We're going to be doing another School of the Prophets. I did one last year. So be on the lookout for the information for that. Yeah, I'll leave y'all with this, right? The prophetic flows through intimacy. You have to be intimate with the God that you're trying to be a voice for. And to the people listening to prophetic leaders, hold them accountable for not being helpful. It's not God that doesn't care, it's them. And with that, I'll leave you. If you want to connect with me further, caveofmystery.org. Until next time, y'all be blessed. Later.